Hey guys, how are you doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be talking about my thoughts and impressions on a pretty cool little game called 3000th Duel. So 3000th Duel is a pretty unique little 2D side-scrolling hack and slash kind of adventure game, and I fully admit that I had not heard of it until it was getting ready to release on the Nintendo Switch. It apparently released on Steam back in September of 2019 and is now of course available on the Switch. And I've been playing it for the past probably week to 10 days, and I've got to tell you, I'm really surprised on how much I'm enjoying this game. It's pretty darned good. The story setup is incredibly simple, which is actually something that I like. For a game like this, you play as basically a nameless hero who I thought was a woman, but I've seen some other things online referring to the character as a man, so I guess I can't be 100% sure on that, as silly as that seems. But your character is also wearing a mask, and they wake up nameless and with no memory. And basically, as soon as that's happening, you're playing the game, your character is on their adventure, and they don't really bog you down with any details. In a lot of games, we want as much story and exposition as possible, but for me, a game like this that's based more on the simplicity of just the back and forth action and slashing and gameplay, I don't really care too much about the details of the story, at least right in the beginning. They do give you snippets of your character's memory back throughout the game as you defeat bosses and find new areas. So that's neat, and it does fill in some of the backstory. There's not a lot of presentation to it. It's literally just a wall of text every time you find exposition. But it's something. It's interesting that it's there. But like I said, for me, for a game like this, I don't really care too much about the story. I just care about the gameplay and the aesthetic and the setting and the music and the combat and all of that stuff. And really, I enjoy pretty much every aspect of that. As far as the gameplay goes, it has to be said that this is a game, another game, in a long line of recent releases that does seem to be borrowing from the Dark Souls formula and implementing it into a 2D kind of Metroidvania experience. And I know that a lot of people might want to groan when they hear that. There are a lot of people who try to push back against the kind of adjective or descriptor of being a Souls-like game. But I can't really help it when a game truly is Souls-like. I mean, I'm not really writing the rules here. Dark Souls really did pioneer a very unique form of combat, of difficulty, of level progression, of experience points, and how you use those to your advantage, and how you lose them, and how you reset enemies when you save, and all of these things. These are things that really were put in place from the Dark Souls and the Souls kind of universe, and there are games nowadays that continually are using mechanics like this more and more, and this game is one of them. So if you like the idea of that, especially if you like the idea of that kind of Dark Souls kind of gameplay and difficulty and experience building mixed with a 2D Metroidvania kind of experience, then that's really where I think 3000th Duel, if I could say the name correctly, is going to shine for you, because that's something that I was very, very happy with as I started to play this game and realized that that's what it's doing, and in my opinion, it implements these ideas really well. But of course, if it's a Souls-like game, does that mean that it's also very, very difficult? And to that I would say for the most part, no. This game, at least early on in the first couple of hours, I will admit things change as you move on through the game. I'm pretty far into the game right now, and so I can kind of attest to this. But I will say in the first couple of hours and the first couple of areas you go to, simply traversing the world and the maps and fighting the normal enemies you run into is not overly difficult. There's like some regular challenge, but in general, it's not too crazy. It's a fairly simple game, kind of across the board if we think about it. There's not a whole lot of depth to the game. But I will say that the bosses initially do present a pretty fair challenge, and then once you get over a certain hump and you make it to a certain area, suddenly things do change, and the enemies are very difficult, and the boss you fight is 1,000 times harder than the previous bosses, in my opinion. I will not spoil any of this, but the game does hit a point where it kind of overall becomes a much more difficult experience, and does feel a little bit more like what you might consider a Souls-like game to be, as far as traversing the world, to fight the bosses, to level up, to do all these things, and suddenly you're dealing with enemies that can poison you and bombs that can give you status effects if they hit you, and all of these things. And as that stuff starts to happen more and more, and there's plenty of areas with spike dodging that is incredibly difficult, The difficulty will ramp up, and it will kind of catch you off guard, so it's something to be aware of. One of my favorite aspects of the game is honestly the level of depth that your character can level themselves up and the amount of equipment that you can use. I was very excited to see early on that you get a ton of different kinds of weapons. There are blunt force weapons, there are slashing weapons, there are lance, spear-like weapons, and they all do different kinds of damage. And there's different amulets and charms you can get that give you different kind of status boosts or effects to increase your critical hit rate, or your defense, or your damage, or your occult, which is kind of your magic skill that you can use. There's a lot to this game for being just a small little side-scrolling game. I mean, your character itself has a lot of depth. There's less attributes to upgrade. There's only 4 main attributes that you can upgrade. But for a game that's this overall simple, it works really, really well to making it feel like it's maybe a little bit deeper than it truly is. And using the different weapons and changing your different magic abilities is a lot of fun and makes a huge difference when fighting different enemies or traversing different areas. It's really just great. Now, lastly, I do want to touch on the overall presentation and the visuals and the music to the game, because this is something else that also very much caught me off guard, and I'm going to admit, I'm going to keep on gushing here. I really, really love it. It's unique in the sense that what you see as far as the map area you're in at any one time is very kind of close and simple. You're so close to the character and close to the world, and because of that, your character and the enemies around you are very big for what we would normally see from a game like this. If you compare a game like this to like an Ori and the Blind Forest, or a Hollow Knight, or a Metroid or Castlevania game, usually the camera is so far back, you can see more of the map, which is nice, but also your character and the enemies are pretty small. In this game, we're pretty close to your character, and I think in the wrong hands, maybe that would have been a nuisance and made the game more difficult or less fun to play. In this game, I don't know what it is about what the developer NeoPopcorn did, but honestly, I kind of like being this close to my character and seeing them so large and the enemies so large, and because the maps aren't super complicated and convoluted, it doesn't make it hard to navigate, right? Like, I'm not feeling like I'm missing seeing elements to the map and I'm confused on where to go because I'm so close to my character that I can't see the world. That's just not the case. Visually, you can see that it's using basically like a 3D polygonal art style for the character and the enemies and whatnot. And I can see how that might turn some people off. In 2D games, we obviously like sprites and we like hand-drawn art. But in this game, it really, really works. And I love the look of the foreground, and I really adore the look of the background. Hopefully you guys can see how well that stuff comes through here. The level of detail in the backgrounds and the way it's got that distance blur to it, and the way it moves at a different kind of speed as the front pane that you're actually playing on, I don't know, man, it really works, and there's a bunch of cool effects. There's a bunch of neat lighting effects, whether you're in the dark or the daytime, the inside, the outside, and based on the enemies that you're fighting and the attacks that they're throwing at you or the items that you're using. Really cool lighting effects, and you get the cool sun god rays coming through the trees when you're in some of the forest areas. It's pretty neat, man. And also, the music is fantastic. It is so ambient and moody, and a lot of it's also very kind of positive and upbeat feeling, especially in the opening forest area. And there's also plenty of NPCs to run into, by the way. Another nice surprise. There are NPCs to talk to who give you hints and kind of talk to you about the world and kind of flesh out the world and your character a little bit. And they're these cute little animal creatures, and it's just, you know, something I have to say about this game that I think is an absolute positive is it reminds me of a very modern take on classic N64 and PS1 era games like this. Something about it, the look and the sound, specifically the sound and the way the combat is, it just feels like this is you know, like a Guitaru Man, or I don't know, different kinds of platformers that you would find on the 64 or the PS1. And obviously those games on those consoles are very outdated and they don't play very well today. But if you could take the kind of fundamentals from those games and everything about their design, from the visuals to the gameplay to the music, and make it modern and make it work in 2020, to me, that's what 3000th Duel is. I actually love that. I almost feel like I'm getting hit with like nostalgia beams as I'm playing this game, simply because of how it sounds and how it looks. And it's something that I think is a credit to the game, and it makes it just that much more interesting. But of course, it doesn't play like an outdated game from 20 years ago. It's not clunky or awkward. It's fairly quick response. There's a lot of ways to upgrade the abilities that you have when you're attacking. I think your character is incredibly nimble, This dash attack that they have is very useful, and you will use it a lot, especially as you level it up. Basically, I just love almost everything about this game. And so in summary, I will say the game is not perfect. It is a little bit simple. It's not a very complex game as far as how it's built. And I think that the difficulty spike kind of coming out of nowhere is a little bit strange and not ideal. Also, the story being non-existent and presented just in walls of text, while not necessarily something that bothers me, does kind of hold the game back from feeling just a little bit more polished. And I know that it's something that a lot of other gamers might actually want and might feel like they're missing. It's not bothering me, but I could see it bothering other people, and so it is definitely worth noting that. So I'm pretty far into the game. I think that I'm near the end, and so since I haven't yet beaten it, I don't necessarily want to give it an actual score, but I will just tell you that it's a really, really solid game. I can't imagine anyone who likes Metroidvania games or a game like a Bloodstained, Hollow Knight, things like that, isn't going to end up enjoying this game, especially also if you like Dark Souls. This game also very much reminds me of a game I played not that long ago called Blasphemous, which I had been raving about. That is one of my favorite games in a very long time. I was sleeping on it for a while, honestly. I had no idea it was going to be that good. And this game is very much like that. So if these are games that you've played, Blasphemous, Dead Cells, Hollow Knight, Ori and the Blind Forest, any Metroid or Castlevania game, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, this is a game that to me fits right in line with those games and is just as good as some of them, and even better than some of them. I'm not going to tell you which ones I think it's better than, but I really do like it. Despite the game's simplicity, I think this game is a lot of fun. So I highly, highly recommend it to anyone who likes Metroidvania games, side-scrolling hack-and-slash action games, or anything like in the Dark Souls genre, honestly. It's perfect for all of this stuff. So those are my thoughts on 3000th Duel. I hope that you check it out. If you do, please let me know what you think about it below. With that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in. This is Rob of Rule of 2 Review, and I'll catch you guys next time on another video.